Hey guys, it's been a while.
No shit.
Shut up. In the last video, we touched on some darker points of the ambassadors. In this video, we're going to be shifting focus a little to what is going on behind the scenes. These stories were brought to us by people who have worked at the company and who had some interesting things to tell about what goes on behind the scenes, as I've said. And there's a lot going on. I hope you guys enjoy the video, but before we get into it, I'd just like to thank all of my supporters at Coffee for supporting this channel. You guys are, as always, awesome. And please remember to check out Moon's channel if you haven't already. She makes some awesome content and deserves all the support she can get.
On with the video.
As we were diving into the stories of the dark side of the ambassadors, we were visited by a few hooded figures who were willing to share even more stories, although this time it stretched far beyond into the very core of SSO. Now, we've been asking these questions for years. What is going on at the company? And these people were willing to do a tell-all and an exposé of sorts.
Now, before we dive in, we want to make this clear. These stories were told by a few people who were in much the same position. One of our sources actually worked at SSO for a good few years. It was interesting to hear what they had to say, and a lot of what they said corroborated with what was going on in the game.
Our first story will be about moderators, because moderators was actually a thing at one point.
The moderator program for SSO started in 2015. Moderators, for those who don't know, were actual players in the game who would actually moderate the chat. They were looking for small things like cussing, romantic roleplay, sexual interactions, bullying, harassment, etc. Essentially, they made sure the chat remained friendly and safe for all players. Each moderator was given a manual for the tool and a guide on how to moderate, so to grab a quote from the moderator guide, "As a moderator in Star Stable, you have the opportunity to help us create a safer environment for all players."
Some other quotes that should be added and mentioned are: bullying. Bullying is never allowed and should be stopped as soon as possible. Players are never supposed to say anything negative regarding another player or person. With great power comes great responsibility.
With great power comes great responsibility.
We're counting on you to take your role as a moderator seriously, and that you're not afraid to send warnings to your friends as well, if that should be necessary. At the same time, you can't send out warnings for no reason. If it turns out that you've misused the tools you've been given access to, we will ask you to leave the project.
These will be important for later. You are also given a tool menu to help. In particular, this menu allows you to either 1. Kick a player from the game, 2. Close the chat for them for a short period of time, 3. Send them a warning, and 4. Post a global warning in chat. Although moderator powers were limited, the idea was to ensure that kids understood that someone was watching them like it was Big Brother 1984. However, what this meant was that moderators were essentially toothless. They had to directly contact someone at SSO to ban a player that was being unruly. This would only be done after multiple warnings, but even then, the people on the other side didn't always help out.
Their ages ranged from 14 to 16, and mostly they were kids, from middle school or high school. A little suspect if you ask me, but this is SSO we're talking about, who will hire 13-year-olds to become ambassadors. Moderators were always anonymous. Your ability to moderate hung entirely on your anonymity. So, when you warned someone, for example, they would receive a message from a quote-unquote moderator. Not from you personally, but if players knew who you were, they could put you on the ignore list, and then you, even as a moderator, had absolutely no idea what they were saying, and so you were essentially useless as a moderator.
You can probably start to see the issue here. Something else to note about the moderators is that they kept tabs on certain individuals who were older and really liked to interact with people way younger than them, if you get what I'm saying.
Fans of the playground?
Yes, Rattle. That's a nice way to put it.
No! God, please, no! 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 No!
They monitored these interactions and made sure that the kids were, in general, safe from these predators. They also made sure to warn them and to keep them away from these people, but unfortunately the moderators were online all the time.
One of the major flaws of the program was there was no relay in place. So when a moderator went to bed, that was it. No one was keeping an eye on the chat. One moderator woke up one evening because they couldn't sleep and found a slew of vulgar discussions in the global chat. They issued a warning and reported the problem to SSO to possibly add more moderators, but nothing was done about it. The other problem was that the moderators found themselves shackled to the global chat. Because they were responsible for the chat, they couldn't really play anymore. So they were stuck hovering around Stevie's farm or Moorland just to keep an eye on the chat and what people were saying. This was also reported, but nothing was ever done to alleviate the problem.
One person in particular was not too eager to help these moderators out, but we'll discuss them soon. But what we can see is a poorly thought out program which was set in place to supposedly help keep kids safe. But it had a lot of cracks that we're about to show. We're first going to talk about the Hungarian servers, so let's set the scene. Around 2017, a Hungarian game master promoted 3 people to moderator status for the server. All in all, this game master was a friendly, good soul, but unfortunately she was on her way to maternity leave and could not be as active as she hoped to be.
We have 5 players in the story. Corinne Mistel, the Hungarian game master, the nice moderator. We'll call them Joe, and then the 2 joker moderators that caused all of the damned problems. The Hungarian game master, who has left the company by now, was friends with these 2 jokers. She shared some insider info with them and they wormed themselves into her good graces. Soon after the moderator system was applied in-game, these 2 jokers became the chat moderators for the Hungarian server.
You can imagine how that went. They snapped at people, belittled them, bullied them, kicked them if they didn't like them, and Corinne Mistel was often the target of harassment. It was a shit show, to be honest with y'all. They threatened and insulted players left and right, and keep in mind, most of these people they were insulting were kids. They would throw their weight around and even state openly that they wished they could ban people permanently because they quote-unquote didn't like them. Just an awful experience overall, and despite sending SSO numerous emails about the situation, they were not removed because the Hungarian game master was not available at that time. These stories were also sent directly to their main contact, Stacy Place, but she didn't do anything. Stacy, according to both ambassadors and moderators, was not very active and didn't really care about the people she was the manager of. Overall, she mostly ignored these people even when moderators were bullying players. What was that quote again?
Bullying. Bullying is never allowed and should be stopped as soon as possible. Players are never supposed to say anything negative regarding another person or player. And also, if it turns out that you've misused the tools you've been given access to, we will ask you to leave the project.
I thought so. Hashtag yes, I'm a horse girl. The anti-bullying campaign that does not care about the kids getting bullied inside their own community.
Continuing on with the story, Joe, the 3rd Hungarian moderator, knew who these other 2 players were and also knew that they did not like her at all. But because they were all anonymous, she could essentially keep out of harm's way as long as they didn't know who the 3rd Hungarian moderator was. So she, in general, kept her head down and went about her days as best she could. She was cordial, but watched on as these 2 jokers continued to harass people. Joe would report these 2 moderators to Stacy Place, but little was done, and with no Hungarian game master to help out, they were up shit creek without a paddle. Corinne was still being bullied, harassed, and being kicked from the servers. They just would not let up with her at all. Despite Corinne reporting them numerous times and other players reporting them numerous times as well, no one at the company cared enough to do anything about it. Sound familiar, anyone? Has anyone seen this with the ambassadors maybe? On top of that, kids were also getting harassed, and all that Joe could do was keep her head down and away from them. As long as she remained anonymous, she was safe from these idiots. But it gets a little worse. The 2 jokers eventually got a hold of the Hungarian Facebook page. Just a brief correction here, this was actually the official SSO Hungarian Facebook page, and decided to ban anyone they didn't like from it. Brilliant.
Brilliant! Brilliant!
They also used the Monday Fun Day events to post their own art and promote themselves. Overall, these 2 were tyrants. And then Stacy Place decided to send them all some star coins. A lovely gesture, sure. But she made one fatal error. She decided to list all the in-game names of the moderators. Remember, staying anonymous is the only way you can be an effective moderator. No one knows why in the world she did this, but Joe felt the wrath of their anger from that point onward. They hid her in real life, and when her name was dropped, they turned against her like freaking harpies. They would often tell the players to do the opposite of what the other moderator, Joe, was telling them to do. If Joe told the players to stop doing romantic roleplays, the jokers would tell the players to ignore Joe.
The 2 mods shared her name with the rest of the server. They also shared many other moderators' names from the servers as well. All of this ensured the players could now put Joe and other moderators on ignore and avoid all of their moderating, and so the hell began. Joe couldn't see what people were saying, so she was essentially useless as a moderator. Remember, your entire functionality as a moderator hung on your anonymity, and they just blew it. And the two continued to harass and bully Joe and Corrine. Joe told Stacy about the situation, and after a long and tedious battle, Stacy decided the best course of action for her was for Joe to reset her account so that she could get a new one.
What? Bro, what are you talking about, man?
Not actually do anything about the other moderators, but just, yeah, you need to reset your account. But instead of just changing the name or giving her a new account or anything else, their only option was to reset. Joe quickly dismissed the idea, as she didn't want to lose all of her progress on the account.
But the harassment did not end there. They decided to block her off of the Facebook page. This is after they started threatening people on the page as well. Once again, most of them are kids. Joe contacted Stacy again, and after she looked into it, quote unquote, the ban was miraculously lifted. Stacy's reaction was interesting. A short and quick, "Don't provoke them." They were abusing this moderator, and despite sending them numerous screenshots, numerous emails, neither Stacy nor SSO ever did anything about it. Joe felt that she was driving everyone at the company crazy. She kept pushing people to do something, and she was starting to feel like the bad guy for trying to bring attention to the situation. She also felt like she was putting too much effort into a job that didn't even pay her anything. She was going to quit the moderator program and the game. She was tired of getting bullied and tired of fighting a losing battle.
Then a miracle. Stacy went on vacation. A running joke in Star Stable workers is that Stacy's work apparently only gets done when she goes on vacation, because other employees would then take over her workload. Joe once again sent all the evidence through to another game master. The community also banded together to set up a Facebook page of their own, showcasing in intricate detail how players had been harassed, threatened and bullied by these moderators. And finally, after over a year of constant harassment, the two moderators were finally removed from the program with no consequences beyond that. The whole situation is a strange mix of incompetence and negligence. It really does seem sometimes that SSO doesn't care what goes on in the community, as if the last thing on their mind is actually helping out the people in their programs.
But we have yet another story. This ambassador is from another server and also wished to remain anonymous. Her story is much the same as the previous one, with one or two changes. We'll call her Pip. Pip worked as a moderator from 2015 till 2019. She had a different contact person at first who was very helpful and kind throughout their time at SSO. If Pip ever requested someone needed to be banned, they were quick to do so. They were on top of the game, so to speak. Pip also made a point of being nice to people in chat. When she spotted new players, she'd give them a welcome message in global, or when she noticed people were struggling with something in the game, she quickly replied to help them out. Overall, Pip tried to be a moderator who was not only moderating, but also helpful. Then her original contact person left and Stacy Place took over.
Now this is where Pip's frustration began. Much like Joe commented, Stacy simply didn't have time nor the drive to do her duty as the manager of the moderators and ambassadors. She was rarely available, and whenever anything was reported, her one and only response was, "She'll look into it." Overall, Pip had some issues with people online, but nothing too serious, until Stacy Place decided to share all the names of the moderators. Much like with Joe, Pip was targeted almost instantly. And despite numerous attempts asking Stacy to help out, she was essentially ignored. Pip was also asked to stop being nice to people in chat, although no reason was given. She had to stop answering questions in game, and had to stop being helpful to some. She did so, but sometime later they were asked again to start being nice to people, but unfortunately that ship had already sailed.
Pip would send numerous questions about both the moderator's tools problems and the fact that she was being harassed, but Stacy ignored it and focused instead on reprimanding her when she said a light cuss word. They would eventually give the moderators a better tool which would allow them to mute the players, but this was quickly removed despite working like a charm. No reason was given. On July 1st, 2019, an article was posted on the RTL Nieuws, which is a Dutch news outlet, specifically talking about Star Stable and how it exposes the kids to online predators.
In the popular online game Star Stable, young girls take care of their digital horses and chat with other players via the chat room. That is also the place where the 12-year-old missing Rotterdam girl would have met her alleged kidnapper.
What?
Yeah, you heard that right, guys. The story is not well known in SSO circles for some unknown reason, but yes, this is where a kidnapper apparently met his victim. Staying safe online is a must, which is why SSO really needs to up the security in more ways than one. But the point of this is that kids were getting exposed to fans of the playground in July of 2019. 2019. This is not a problem that has gone away in recent years. Fans at the playground are a reality that is part of online gaming, especially in a game where young girls are the main target audience.
On October 31st, a news article was posted citing that a fan of the playground was being charged with 84 accounts of unsavory acts against minors, and mind you, this was after he was released from prison for the exact same crime.
Less than 2 weeks after this happening, Stacy sent out an email stating, "We have recently hired a legal person to be part of the Star Stable team full-time, assisting with all legal matters, but also focusing on the compliance with the GDPR, COPPA, etc. She has stressed that currently the moderator program is not compliant with the law, namely in regard to our privacy policy not containing information that informs parents and players that moderators exist in the game." The simple solution would have been to just officially announce the moderators, but this was not done. The good news is, this can absolutely be rectified. We intend to rebuild the moderator program so that it is fully compliant with agreements and transparencies across the board. This will take time, as updating the terms and conditions and privacy policy are a larger task that will touch on all parts of the company. In the meantime, I will be focusing on restructuring the project so that proper agreements, guidelines and processes are in place. Since the closing of the program in 2019, no moderators have been added to the game, so this means that either the program is still being worked on or it's still being structured. But yeah, there should or needs to be at least some moderators in the game to ensure that kids don't end up with unsavory characters.
The Moderators program came to a sad conclusion, but they were at least promised ambassador statuses and were given 10k star coins as a goodbye present. In total, these moderators would receive around 17k star coins to compensate for 4 years of work, much better than the ambassadors at least. But this was all done to apply with COPPA and to ensure that kids would not be exposed to the unsavory part of internet people. Unfortunately, this is when the really shitty version of the chat filter was added to the game. Y'all remember words being constantly centered and barely being able to chat anything? The reason was mostly to apply with COPPA. The chat filter was finally abolished in 2021 to the "this message is not approved" system. Now people can chat more freely, but with no moderation, no protection, no one keeping an eye on what goes on in the game. In 2021, when they launched the new chat system, an article towards new generation chat moderation in Star Stable Online gushed about how brilliant SSO was and amazing AI with chat moderation. They cited how they did it, how the AI learns, and how it prevents kids from being exposed. But the problem is, the chat filter isn't working.
It is god-awful, with players reporting racist slurs being accepted through the chat, child grooming questions still being filtered through the chat, insults, swearing, the C word, the N word, anything goes, and it's not getting any better. With children being constantly in danger of finding unsavory folk online, this should be something SSO should be taking more seriously. Constant moderation for the chat is required, as kids will always find a way to bypass a program, as will smart fans of the playground. Point is, moderation is still the best way to keep these kids safe on chat, but SSO doesn't want or can't afford to have online moderators, so the chat remains a mess and will remain as such until SSO fixes it. They once said that with great power comes great responsibility, and that is true. As a company, SSO, you have enormous power over the people that you hire and employ, or that you include into your programs, ambassador or moderator. It was and still is today your responsibility to keep these people safe from bullies and harassers, both players and moderators, as you once expected them to do in your game. Now we get into the final section, the behind the scenes section, where we see a little more of SSO than we really wanted to. There is a very old saying, good management begins at the top. This essentially means that if your managers are poor, this will echo down to the chain of command and affect the lower decks of your ship, and so directly affect the proficiency of your crew and possibly engineering.
You've been watching Star Trek again, haven't you?
Maybe.
Anyways, as my Star Trek fangirlfriend was trying to say is that when a company has bad managers, it leaks down to the other departments and affects them in a negative way. We saw this with the ambassadors and the moderators. Both of these teams were being managed by Stacey Place. Both of these teams were in a bad state, but this extended into the rest of the company. Our sources shared the following information. The company started out with around 30 people and grew to around 160 people before this person left. In that time, it went from a close-knit family to a soulless corporate corporate machine. They were told to smile more by the previous CEO.
Weekly deadlines create panic. The testers will usually get the material on Monday, so they have around a day and a half to test the new material before it is to be added to the game on Wednesday.
Developers have asked numerous times for monthly updates instead, but SSO refuses to change it because they quote-unquote like the constant social media posts and content.
Marketing and developers are at odds. Marketing tended to walk around the company and socialize, while developers were held to strict and unforgiving deadlines.
Communication was a big problem. The departments had cliques, and this caused friction and problems. With no good communication lines, this caused problems throughout the company. An example of this would be the Pasadena that was released too early, most likely due to poor communication between departments.
The social media manager is also a bit of a problem. Throughout the company, she is known as a bully and only cares about your input if she likes you. She has a lot of connections, and so despite numerous complaints about her conduct and her actions, she has not been reprimanded. She would also write her salary in big, bold letters in the kitchen on a whiteboard, just for shits. She made around 72k a year at the time, and others made around 25k.
Her best friend works in PR communications, according to our source. She is quite incompetent and rarely, if ever, does her work in a timely fashion.
Both of these women only cared and listened to yes men. They were given special treatment, like the chance to go to conventions and other fun places. But anyone else who was considered stubborn or difficult were shunned and ignored in the company.
A full project called The City of Stars was completely canned because of the incompetence of the project manager. In short, after a whole year's worth of work, she had nothing to show for it. The whole team was disbanded, the project was scrapped, and the project manager was promptly fired.
Good ideas were rarely considered if they did not come from one of the favorites. One employee in 2015, for example, insisted on an authenticator to increase account security. To this day, people are still pushing for this to be added. Despite it being a good idea, it was shoved aside because it wasn't brought up by one of the favorite employees.
The Quest team, it turns out, was for years, it was just one guy working on it. He was one of the founders of the company and demanded that he be the only one to work on the story. This is apparently the reason we had to wait 1.5 years for an update.
At their office parties, there was one individual who would get too drunk and start groping people. And this led to a lot of warnings, but they were also never removed from the company. The point is, though, that the company is run by people who don't seem to care about what is going on in the company. As stated by our source, the company doesn't listen. They don't consider new ideas. They have favorites, they don't always do their work, and even people who are wildly incompetent remain in the company, which in turn hurts the company.
Like we said, good management begins at the top. If they did care, they would at the very least extend the weekly updates to bi-weekly to help their employees push for better updates. They would listen to good ideas and they would let their ideas become realized.
This is what we call a soul-crushing work environment. Game developers and designers are by definition creators. They are creative and they want to realize that creativity in their work. When great ideas are constantly shut down, you get people who either give up, fall into depression, or they just leave.
Getting a job at the company is another minefield in itself. An aspiring artist wanted to work at SSO. Here's her review on Glassdoor. I applied online. The process took 4 months and I interviewed at Star Steel Entertainment in June 2020. The interview process started with getting emails from their wonderful talent scout that no longer works at SSO. We planned for a phone interview a week later and this ended at the end of May, start of June. The phone interview was nice and I was invited to a second interview 2 weeks later. This interview was with the talent scout and the lead artist. I was assigned a work task to complete within a week. Now we are in July. I was then invited for a third interview with the team where they would go over my work. This was with the art director and the game director. Again, a very nice interview with a lot of positive feedback, giving motivation. After summer holidays, I was invited for a 4th interview with the HR team. This is at the very end of August. Again, wonderful interview with positive feedback. In the 2nd week of September, I was finally called and told I was runner-up for the position, as they opted for a senior artist instead, which is fine. After this, I asked for more feedback on the work task I did, and I got an email back telling me they would like to have me in as an intern at Star Steel for the next year. So I quickly applied for government funding to move to Sweden and get the internship covered. After a week, I got the scholarship accepted and emailed back telling them I was set to become an intern. The answer I got back after this was that they had changed their mind and we're going to have more interns after all. This is extremely unprofessional. Not only did the interview process go over 4 interviews, but it lasted from the end of May / start of June till September.
What we see here is clearly a company in juxtaposition of itself. On the one hand, they have employees who care and do want to help the game grow, and on the other they have managers who don't seem to care at all. Now, I think it only fair that we do mention that SSO has gotten a little better over the past couple of months or so, and I do feel like they're taking some steps to right some issues. But that doesn't change what is going on inside the company. So here is some advice an ex-employee would like to impart on them. Listen to all of your staff. You tend to listen to only your yes people, which isn't helpful. All voices should be heard. Now let's hope they do listen. This series was a damned wild ride, and a lot happened throughout. We learned a lot about ambassadors, about moderators, about the hell SSO put these people through, and what goes on behind the scenes. Before we close off, we'd like to address the problem of anonymity, specifically understanding the reason why these people want to stay anonymous, because it's important to hear it in their own words and understand why ambassadors and SSO by extension needs to be more cautious in their actions.
I want to stay anonymous because I got bullied online, got called a bitch for standing up for the players, and at the end of it, I got warned not to provoke them. I got ignored by the SSO team, and I really felt bad about myself for trying to do the right thing while this was supposed to be fun for me.
It's mostly not to save my skin, but the ones closest to me. My friends I know will be anonymous, and I want to keep them safe from people who would hurt them. They can be very good at connecting dots. I'll go to great lengths to keep them safe, both of these moderators, as they are very dear to me.
I like to remain anonymous just because I've seen how quickly people attack people for sharing their stories, and it really shouldn't be like that. There's multiple times where people just go on attack people for sharing a story they've had bottled up because they were too scared to share it, and I'm paranoid it will happen to me.
The power ambassadors in the SSO community have is scarily disproportionate to what they're made out to be. My incident with some of the ambassadors proved that people who were put in this position of power to uplift and inspire the community instead can use it to suppress and blackmail them. When I came with the evidence of my experiences to the other ambassadors and game masters for help, it was swept under the rug, and the few perpetrators were swaddled in a blanket of security. I know for a fact if my identity were to be revealed, I would be put on a stake and figuratively burnt through their public profiles. They would plead their innocence and send a witch hunt after me with every intent of driving me out of the SSO community. This mindless, constant promotion of ambassadors over the past 3 years has not been based on quality, appreciation of the game, and a genuine wish to help the community, and more care needs to be taken in choosing who represents their company. And I think that is a great place to end the video, and to leave us all for some food for thought. If people who represent your company incites this amount of fear, then you should understand that something is wrong. If a company has enough problems to encourage a high turnover rate, then something is wrong. Whatever is going on in that company, it needs to be addressed to ensure that this game keeps going for those extra 10 years you hope it will stay for. But if you don't, then these types of situations will not be handled, and it will forever remain a smear on the company and Star Stable as a whole. Alright, that concludes the Ambassador video. It was a damn wild ride. I want to give a huge thank to Daniella Moonstar for taking the time to help me with this video. I would have become completely lost without her, even though she's a dirty little burglar and broke into my house.
Glad I could help. What the fuck you called me?
Be sure to check out her social media pages and her YouTube channel. She's got some great documentaries, and I'll leave a recommendation down below.
And as always, thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time. Bye!